We are back with a HubScale podcast where we dive into the minds of security leaders all around the world. This week we have Vishal Gupta, founder and CEO of Seclore. I'm super excited to have you on the show today and dive into some awesome topics. Vishal, it's great to have you on.
My pleasure, and thanks a lot for having me. Super excited.
Awesome. So I guess for everybody who doesn't know Vishal Gupta, it'd be great to have a quick introduction.
Well, I'm a engineer turned CEO by serendipity. I grew up in India, and my final year project in undergrad was the genesis of the first company that I was a part of, which was called Herald Logic. Ran that company for about 6 years when it was acquired by an Australian company. And then since 2010-11 timeframe is when a bunch of us co-founded Seclore. And the last 12 years odd has been this exhilarating ride called Seclore, which I'm sure we're going to talk more about. But during these two entrepreneurial stints and the background of investing in a bunch of other companies has taken me literally across the world. So I've spent a couple of years in Melbourne, a few years in Singapore, of course, grew up in India. Now I spend most of my time in California, spent 1 year in New York and so on, right? So I've kind of been all over the place in more ways than one.
No, I love that as well. Traveling around the world, living in different cultures and locations, and building multiple companies at the same time. I absolutely love it, and I'm super excited to dive into some of them points you mentioned there. But just tell me a little bit more about Seclore. Sorry, tell me what problem you're solving in the market, and why did you actually found the company a while ago?
The risk with talking to an entrepreneur and asking what his company is that he'll end up spending like 2 hours, right? So tell me when to stop. But so I think the underlying challenge that we saw, in the early days of Seclore, and the thesis pretty much remains the same. So even though the company's been around for 10 or 12 years, actually, there's been no pivot, so to say, in the journey of the company, which is unusual, right? Yeah. For a company that's been around for this long a time. The underlying thesis here is that enterprises have spent a lot of time and energy protecting what we call infrastructure, which is devices, networks, applications, and the likes. And the underlying thesis here that we had was that all of these are surrogate methods of protecting the real asset, which is data. Mm-hmm. Because most of the infrastructure that enterprises are dealing with today doesn't even belong to the enterprise, right? Networks don't belong to the enterprise. Most of us are working out of airports and hotels and homes and so on, networks. Our devices don't belong to the enterprise because most people do most of the computing on phones and iPads and sometimes on, office provided or enterprise provided laptops. And applications have all moved to the cloud. So if you look at it from an enterprise perspective, the very things that you're trying to protect are the things that you don't even own. It's almost like a renter buying homeowners insurance. Right? It doesn't really make any sense to buy homeowners insurance because the thing, it doesn't even belong to you. Mm-hmm. And that fundamental insight, that the journey or the phenomena that had already started back in 2010-11 timeframe, we are seeing it in full flow today, 12 years forward, that nearly every piece of enterprise infrastructure today doesn't belong to the enterprise. And the only real asset is data. And therefore, Seclore's, the core technology that Seclore has is a method by which security posture can be moved to data instead of infrastructure. Right. So you discover the data, you protect the data itself, all the security travels with the data wherever it goes, and you're able to track data instead of tracking connections or tracking access and so on. You're able to do everything which is data centric, data oriented. Right. So that's what the company does. And in that journey, we've been lucky to partner with some of the largest enterprises in the world. Many hundreds of the Fortune 1000 globally, companies like American Express, Applied Materials, Ford, GM, and the list goes on, have chosen to partner with Seclore in their data security journey. So that's been very humbling, and it's a really proud, feeling that a project out of a university is today securing the world's largest enterprises and organizations.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love it. And I can't wait to break down the journey of that, because obviously it's data security and data protection, everything along those lines has kind of been around for some time, but I don't think it's ever going to go away. It's literally going to be the main factor, because you see a lot of kind of new technologies coming out in the security world, and they're probably a feature of something that may get acquired by another business. But data security seems to be the one that's always been around and probably will be for a long time.
I definitely believe that, because at the end of the day, the only real asset that belongs to the enterprise is data, right? And the enterprise would not care about the network if it was not carrying the data, would not care about the devices if it was not housing the data, and it would not care about the applications if they were not processing the data that belongs to the enterprise.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. So I want to take it back to the early days. I know we talked about it briefly there, but I want to take it back to the early days of being an entrepreneur. I know obviously you've been involved in multiple companies, but take me back to the days of starting Seclore and starting with your co-founders. Just talk me through that journey.
Well, starting Seclore for me and the other founders was a very different experience from starting our first company, which was, the company I started fresh out of college. So let me maybe compare and contrast these two journeys. Fresh out of college, I was an entrepreneur by serendipity more than anything else, right? There was no plan to become an entrepreneur. It just that my finally a project happened to be such that it became very exciting, and commercial applications of that became very exciting. So to start with, it was just doing everything on my own, right? Which is writing code to selling to even setting up laptops and computers back then and so on, right? So I was literally doing everything. Fast forward 9 years, which is when we started Seclore. I think that was a very different journey, because I had seen the whole life cycle of a company already, right? From like just a concept on paper to a revenue generating company with support, which at the point of time had customers in 10 countries or so, right? Being acquired by an Australian company, being a part of a much larger setup, and then exiting, right? So the whole life cycle. So the second time around, the approach methodology was more structured. It was a lot less activity and a lot more progress early on. It was exactly like swimming, right? I mean, when you swim initially, you're waving your arms and you're moving your legs and so on, but you don't seem to be moving forward as much. The second time was a little more like a experienced swimmer. You're spending much less effort and making a lot more progress. So in the early days of Seclore, it was, hey, we'd seen that script before, we'd seen the movie before, hiring the first set of people, getting our first set of customers, and so on. These are all things that we had gone through before. So it was a far better experience, much surer. We were less tentative about what we wanted to do. Product decisions especially were less based on gut and more based on research, customer research, right, and so on, which gave us a lot more confidence than just gut feeling, let's see where the wind blows kind of decision making, which has its own value. I mean, I'm not discounting that. So these two journeys of starting up companies 9 years apart were very different. But the one thing that was similar is that in 2000, when we were starting our first company, there was doom and gloom, right? The internet bubble had just burst and so on. And in 2009, there was, surprise, there was another doom and gloom, right? The mortgage crisis had just happened. Nobody wanted to talk to anyone which had anything to do with a startup and so on. So both these companies were born out of very tough times in their first few years. So that gave both the companies and actually a lot of character and a lot of resilience.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome actually, and it's quite unique actually, building two companies in both the situations that happened. But I want to take it back to a point you just mentioned there. You mentioned a couple of things regarding product, and obviously kind of the roadmap you was creating and having these nuances that was difference between the first company and the second company. But just for kind of entrepreneurs who are starting out on their own, who are listening to this, what are the real key takeaways in terms of kind of tangible stuff that you can give to the audience?
The first thing, and these are, I mean, there are very different people who start companies and they build companies very different ways, right? So um, my first learning, especially on the product side, is that no matter how smart a set of people you get together making product decision, there is almost nothing that will replace customer insights and customer research.
Mhm.
Right. So that's one thing that we did far more of the second time around with Seclore than the first time around. Decisions were not based on gut. Even the smallest of decisions, right? Whether we should pick red or blue, right, color, or we should place this button on the left or right, right? Those kind of decisions are also customer validated the second time around. Whereas the first time was a bunch of engineers looking at a screen saying, okay, this looks better than the other one, and let's take a vote around the house, and okay, left and blue, right, and so on. So I think customer research is something which first time entrepreneurs, definitely I can confess to about myself, do far less of than required, right? And usually that's because first time entrepreneurs are very product led, and they kind of miss the customer, and they almost discover the customer along the product journey instead of discovering the product along the customer journey, right? Which is, at least I believe today, the way it should be. There are exceptions, I'm sure. I mean, there are exceptions, like Steve Jobs probably didn't do too much customer insighting before he conceptualized the iPhone and so on. So it's possible to create products out in the lab, but in our case, enterprise software products, customer research and insights was critical. The other thing is that product decisions have to be far less emotional then, and need to have a lot less ego before they are made, right? So it's not about, hey, I like this, or I think this should be done this way, and so on, right? So there has to be a little bit of democracy with the customer and the partners involved in the process. Specifically on the product side, the other thing that we did was reduce the cycle times. So in the first company before Seclore, we used to have one release every 6-9 months, and that slowed us down. And second time around, we did the whole engineering in an agile method, so we had one mini release happening nearly every month, and so on. So we iterated much faster, and mistakes were caught much earlier on than otherwise. So those were, I think, more thoughtful product decisions than just being, getting the engineers to work 24/7.
No, it makes complete sense. I mean, a lot of the entrepreneurs, especially the multiple time founders, talk about that as well in terms of the customer and the journey that you have with them. Tell me the differences between the go-to-market strategy. What was the differences between the first and the second company as well?
Very similar to the kind of insights that I mentioned about the product, right? So the first company, we didn't take time out to define an ideal customer profile. So we would sell anything to anyone, pretty much, right? It's a little bit like 6-year-olds playing soccer, right? All 22 of them in the field will be on the ball. Whereas the second time around, we were playing a proper game. We spent a lot of time, again, as part of customer research, doing insights on what kind of customer should we be going after in terms of size, in terms of geography, in terms of industry segments or verticals, and so on. So, and therefore, that kind of thoughtfulness early on made for very efficient early customer acquisition. So, for example, we were careful. We were introducing a new category and a new product in a new category, and therefore we were very aware that the in the Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm book, right? He talks about the early adopters and the visionaries and the late adopters and the majority and so on. So we were very careful to look for the visionaries and early adopters and not spend too much time on the late adopters and the laggards, right? Even though they form the biggest chunk of the market, right? So I think that right, just looking for a set of keywords and people talking about trying to lead the world, whereas on security goes, those were what we were looking for, and not trying to sell to the majority of the enterprise security population.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. I was reading the Okta's co-founder Zero to IPO book, and he was talking about in the early days that they were trying. I think it was a real large enterprise customer, but they had to turn them down because they wanted to add more kind of a segregated product just for that customer, and it would just ruin the whole thing. So no, I really like the story there, and a lot of really good tips as well for the entrepreneurs listening, for sure. I guess taking it a little bit further then. So obviously you've scaled the company now to nearly 300 people, worldwide team. So just tell me a little bit about that journey from the inception to the scaling part.
We had scaled the company, the first company, which is called Herald Logic, before. So at least working across time zones and cultures and so on was not particularly new. Scale challenges like we had, in maybe the fifth or sixth year at Seclore, we didn't have that because the first company never grew to the size that Seclore has grown to today. I think growing globally always is, and that is a battle that we fight to the date today, is about how do we make sure that we are adapting to the local culture and flavors enough. And in that process, we are not adapting it so much that we are ending up running 10 different companies in 10 countries, right? So how much to uniformize across the globe and how much to localize and customize to that particular geography or a particular industry segment when it comes to product decision has been a constant optimization challenge, right? It could be the product itself, for example, local sensitivities around the product. It could be sales motions, the kind of verticals that we are going after, right, and so on, right? There are so many different decisions where we could just take a decision which was optimized for one particular region versus try and uniformize an enterprise-wide, initiative or an enterprise-wide norm, right? And there's nowhere it reflects more than in our people practices or our HR policies, right? There are, and we face that challenge even today as we scale across geographies. We have operations in Saudi Arabia, in UAE, in US, in Germany, and in India, and so on. And besides being different in time zones and languages, these are very different cultures. When you're hiring and recruiting talent and managing talent in general, right? So that's been a constant and a very large struggle, from incentive policies to compensation to how do you encourage performance, how do you give negative feedback, has been very different in these different regions with different sensitivities. And even though we are a company of only 350 people odd, in these 350 people, we have nearly 32 different nationalities working for us, which is a very unusual amount of diversity for a company which is 350 people, right? That's almost like saying 10 people per nationality, and then we move on to have another nationality here, right? And so on. So yeah, I think the choice between localization and globalization across product, people, practices, and so on, that's been one big challenge. We've adapted well, but it continues to be a challenge as we scale up even more, right? So that's one globalization challenge. There are really some really good things that have happened as a part of this. So I'll give you an example. We have a global team which works across US West Coast and India, which are two geographies which are literally 12 hours apart. Now, this could be a challenge because then the whole team gets very little time, if at all, to be on one call or in one place. But the good thing here is that it's the folks in the West Coast, they take a particular initiative to some, then they transfer it over to the team in India, which is just about starting working. And by the time they wake up next morning, a lot of the work is already been done, and then they take over again, right, and so on. So it's a constant handover cycle, which makes work happen at lightning pace, which otherwise wouldn't be possible.
Yeah,
Right?
I like that. Yeah,
Lots of good things.
yeah, nobody's really explained it like that before. Because yeah, you kind of get a 24-hour working then, don't you, from US West Coast to an India. So that's no, it's pretty awesome. I've never heard it like that before. But just you mentioned obviously a little bit there about kind of the not the necessarily struggles, but the once you've grown and you're hiring and all that kind of stuff in different locations. Focusing on the hiring part and the piece a little bit there, what's been the biggest challenge in terms of attracting people to the business? And then obviously kind of flip that on its head and tell me how you've scaled that aggressively as well up to 350 people.
Well, the biggest challenge has been when we go and set up a business in a new geography. Let me give you an example. The last new place where we set up business was probably the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And when you enter this, Seclore is not an established brand. I mean, you're fresh off the boat. It's not an established brand. Most of the research that somebody can do on the company is on the internet, right? You can't pick up the phone and talk to one of your friends who used to work for the company, or talk to a customer of the company, because there are no customers in that geography and so on, right? So hiring or attracting the first set of people in a new geography is a big challenge, because they need to be the best, because they are the ones who are going to be the face of the company when it comes to customers or partners or all external stakeholders. But they are also the most difficult to hire, right? So the first set of people in a new geography is it's almost like the first set of customers. You need people to take that leap of imagination and faith with you, and that's a tough set of people to hire, right? So, but we've been very lucky. I mean, if not in the first round, very quickly, maybe in the second round, we were able to hire top talent in each of the geographies, right? So I think that's one thing that's helped us sail much faster than a lot of other companies as they scale globally.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think having the right people in place in specific regions, and then because we do a lot of work, obviously expanding people into new regions and vendors and things like that. And sometimes it's actually maybe better going for kind of the partner route and then going that way. I know UAE, obviously being based in Dubai, it's heavy partner centric in terms of utilizing all that kind of stuff. So no, really good insights as well in terms of the hiring piece. But I guess in terms of Seclore, the future, just tell me more about where you want to take Seclore.
We keep it simple when it comes to the future. Our goal is to protect the world's information. That's where the name Seclore comes from. So folklore is common knowledge and Seclore is secure knowledge, right? That's how the name of the company comes from. And we are well on our way to securing the world's information, right? And that's our very simple vision. We are focused today on large enterprises. That's not to say that there are product challenges and so on. In theory, 5 people law firms and 20 people audit firms also need this kind of technology. Our current focus is the large enterprises, where we see the way to make the biggest impact early on. And we are well on our way. And I think at the risk of sounding immodest, when it comes to pure play data-centric security players, I think we are the leaders in the large enterprise category. Some of the largest companies in the world and largest government agencies in the world, including parts of the United Nations itself, uses Seclore to protect their most confidential information, right? And it's very humbling to know, and it's scary as an entrepreneur. It's also scary. I mean, if our product fails, national security can get compromised in a lot of countries, right? And that's scary. Sometimes it's keeps me awake to say that, hey, could we be the cause of the next war? I mean, actual war, not only a cyber war, but an actual war. And yeah, it's scary, but very exciting most days.
Yeah, but that's a testament to your products itself, right? And the platform that you've got. I think securing the most critical infrastructure and companies in the world, sorry, is definitely something to be proud of, something to be proud of for sure. And whilst we're on kind of the future side of things, AI and things like that have been talked about a lot recently. But I'd love to hear your kind of thoughts on the actual future of security itself.
See, I think the future of security is kind of already here, because we had hackers at one point of time, hackers trying to break into people's computers and so on, right? So this was a people versus people kind of war that was going on, and now that's not no more the case. It's already the reality in the cybersecurity world is that there are already machines fighting other machines, right? With people which are 2-3 levels removed. It's almost like controlling a drone versus fighting an air, flying a fighter aircraft,
Yeah.
right? There's a big difference between these two. You could have a drone controller sitting in the living room, and flying a drone over, I don't know, to Iraq for that matter. And that phenomena is already there. Now it's a matter of how intelligent can we make these machines, how resilient can we make these machines, and so on. And automation, I mean, I consider automation as a bigger umbrella, of which artificial intelligence is just one kind of automation, right? So automation is going to be the deal maker as well as the deal breaker in either of the cases, right? The companies that automate the most will have two advantages. One is that their machines will be most efficient, right? Just going back to the drone versus aircraft kind of analogy. But also the phenomena that we see around ourselves is that there is a big gap between cybersecurity skills, demand and supply. Just the number of professionals that an average enterprise needs to manage its own cybersecurity posture and data security posture and so on is not even in the same order of magnitude to the amount of talent available out there in the market in the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And just since it's fresh off in Southeast Asia alone, that difference is off by a factor of 10. So the number of cybersecurity jobs outnumber the number of cybersecurity professionals by a factor of 10, right? And there's just not enough people in this world to fulfill all the cybersecurity requirements today. And therefore, automation also plays a big part over there, because instead of making or having initiatives which are people heavy, right, automation also helps in reducing the absolute requirement of cybersecurity skills and making it closer to the availability, rather than coming up with 5,000 jobs for 500 people, right? That kind of gap. And that's very frequently, I mean, you'll find companies not able to hire cybersecurity talent irrespective of compensation and so on, right? So I think automation, in short, is going to play the biggest part, and artificial intelligence is going to lead the chart, but there are a lot of other things which come under the general umbrella of automation.
Yeah, no, I think that's super insightful what you mentioned there, because there's two things. I had a CEO on the podcast a while ago. He said that we've not got a talent shortage, we've got a enablement problem. So even, for example, the people coming into cybersecurity from college or wherever it may be, we just need to put a lot more time and effort into attracting them people and obviously enabling them into the business as well. And then the second piece was a company called Horizon Free. Shout out to Snehal. They can run a pen test in 3 clicks, so they don't need that kind of 20-year veteran who's a pen tester. So yeah, there's super exciting things, but I'm sure the industry should evolve over the coming years, especially with automation and things like that as well.
Absolutely. I think it's impossible to hire talent, right? There's no other method, and companies and countries, by the way, are running out of talent, running out of options to hire talent.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely. Well, look, it's that's running to the end of the podcast today, Vishal, but really, really exciting topics that we've gone through today, and really appreciate you coming on the show. It's been an amazing journey with Seclore and the previous company, and obviously really looking forward to seeing where you take it in the future as well.
Thanks a lot for having me, Elliot, and it's a pleasure. It's always a good idea to share insights that we've collected along the 20-year entrepreneurial journey, right? That's what you're learning of other people's mistakes is what is education. So I'm happy to be a part of that.
Yeah. I always say it's pretty selfish on my part because I'm going through the early doors of that journey myself. So I always like to ask questions that I learn as well.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, if you are in California or in Mumbai anytime, which is the two most frequent locations for me at least, uh, please drop in. Happy to host you.
Sure thing. Sure thing. Well, no, appreciate you coming on and speak to you soon.
Speak soon.